Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk,
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vEXPERT.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. My name is Doug Brown, and I am your host for today. I'm your host for every day, every podcast. Not every day, but every podcast we do, I'm the host. It's my podcast show, and I'm really excited because we have one of my favorite guests that we've ever had on the show, and that's DataCore. And if you listen to any of the past podcasts, you probably enjoyed them. I enjoyed them, and every time we talk about something else too, we don't just repeat the same stuff. So, and it's always an education too. These guys are smart. I make the joke, but it's not a joke. I'm darn serious about it. They are smart folks, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about containers, a little bit about digital transformation, and of course how DataCore addresses and where they fit into that market. But they educate you as much as they share with you what they're doing there. So it's a great listen, I think. And I would love to know your opinion, but you can tell me that when we're all said and done. So with no further ado, we have Paul from DataCore, who's going to share with us a bit about what I just talked about, containers and DataCore. With no further ado, here we go. Okay, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I'm really looking forward to it. As I mentioned earlier, I love DataCore. I love having you guys on, and every time you guys come on, it's just always one of my favorite podcasts, and I always learn something. So today we're going to talk a bit about containers and what DataCore is doing with the containers and in the market in general, too, if you'd like to, if you would, please, because I think containers are definitely the future. So that being said, let's get into it. But before we get into that conversation, we want to, learn a bit about you. So, Paul, who are you and what do you do over at DataCore?
Hey, Doug, thanks for having me on. And, we're really excited to be here, too. I mean, it's a great opportunity for us to talk about the product. But, yeah, so a little bit about me. I have 20-plus years experience in the industry. I've kind of gone through the evolution of, what's happening in storage. I've worked for large companies such as EMC and VMware and IBM and NetApp. But I've also worked at smaller companies like data protection companies and such. So really, it helps kind of have a good perspective of what's happening in the industry. And I was able to kind of take a lot of those, things that I've done in the past and then apply it to what we're doing now in the future with where we're going with this new digital transformation initiatives and containers and all the things that are happening. And, I certainly, love the industry, love what we're doing and where it's going. And with that said, I also try to fit some time in to do some fishing and I like to take my boat out and just have a good time out there, but also, really just kind of focus on, relaxing a little bit while I have some downtime to keep going forward.
That's always fun. You got to have downtime, right? We can't geek out 24/7. Well, we can.
Well, right. I mean, we have some downtime, but not,
not enough, probably.
Exactly.
So, at least that's, I think, how we started the conversation is it's Friday. Hey, we're recording on Friday, and I wish I had an extra day, but not Saturday, right?
Exactly.
So I love what I do, so an extra day wouldn't be a bad thing. So can you tell us a bit about, we bring DataCore quite on quite often, which, like I said, is one of my true joys. But for those who might not know who DataCore is, can you give us who is DataCore?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So DataCore is an exciting business. DataCore is about 20-year-old business, actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year from 1998 to 2018. So it's really exciting for us. DataCore pioneered the software-defined storage. It was software-defined storage before software-defined storage was a thing. Okay. What DataCore did was allowed basically the founders had the vision to kind of come together with a platform that allowed you to use your storage, regardless where your storage lived. So you can have storage from different arrays, from different vendors, different technologies. It can be external storage. It can be internal storage. And then basically harmonize that availability and access to the storage and creating virtual pools and virtualize that disk. So where the strengths that DataCore came into the market were a lot of vendors at the time were saying that, if you want to do things like HA or if you want to do DR or replication, et cetera, you had to have like hardware. And sometimes that just didn't work for customers' environments because, whether it was a, geographic location or just a cost factor, what DataCore allowed prospects and customers to do is to leverage the platform to utilize storage across any vendor and across any deployment. So it can be hyper-converged, it can be converged, it can be virtualized, traditional SAN, or whatever it may be, or even in the cloud. And that storage can then be managed across the infrastructure and properly provisioned and deprovisioned as needed. So you can do burst for projects as needed, and then decommission that storage for other uses as well. So we're really trying to maximize your IT investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a bit about digital. You mentioned digital transformation. It's something I've actually, I wouldn't say confuses me. There's so many different answers. There's so many different areas to it, right? You read a few books and each one is completely different. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to, what DataCore thinks of this and what you think of it. So, IT is really changing today, right? Companies these days are no longer really truly investing into individual IT products for cost and operational savings, right? So instead, they're investing in digital transformation and tools and into all areas of the business. Can you briefly explain digital transformation, how it's fundamentally changing how IT and how businesses are operating and delivering value to their customers?
Absolutely, Doug. So, I'll tell you, one of the things that I brought to the table when I joined DataCore was I've been in the using working with digital transformation as a kind of concept for about 5 years. And when I was at my previous company, I was able to actually write a for dummies book, a rapid application development book that outlined how to take digital transformation initiatives and apply it to real business practices. And companies like Accenture and Deloitte and their digital agencies that are out there are all leveraging these ways of doing omni-channel customer journeys, customer experiences. So when we talk about digital transformation, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a buzzword that everybody seems to be using today. But when we talk about it, we have to remember that digital transformation is a verb. It's an action that needs to occur. The noun of the digital transformation is your digital initiatives. And in the past, you may have seen or heard people talk about, I need to do access to my storage. I need access to my applications. I need to do management, et cetera. And those actions are now considered digital initiatives because what the customers and prospects are trying to do is match their competitive landscape and their business lines to be available for their customers' interaction. So it's all really about the customer experience, the user experience, and how to get that access to information. But the extreme challenge that we see today is IT organizations spend about 80% of their budget on maintenance, right? And 20% of their budget gets spent on innovation. But when we look at the maintenance, the existing systems of record, that's defined as like a database or access to data that you may have, are traditional systems that need to stay up and running. But to innovate, these digital initiatives have to come into play, and these digital initiatives usually means that you create a new system of engagement. And that system of engagement is an application, maybe a front-end application that accesses your database, your system of record. And that a system of engagement that connects to the back-end systems or your systems of record are the digital initiatives that have to occur. So access to this information is challenging because while IT organizations are innovating and driving towards this new way of interacting with front-end systems and back-end systems and truly providing an omni-channel experience, the day-to-day operations for your existing systems of record have to maintain the operations, because you can't, most businesses don't have the luxury of shutting one thing down and then starting something up right away. They have to kind of migrate. So that digital transformation is along a phased approach, and every prospect and customer enters the approach at their own stage of the phase. So they can enter in at any point in time. Does that make sense, Doug?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I love your answer that it's digital transformation is a verb and the noun is the initiative. That's really a great way of explaining it. That being said, you said you wrote a book. Is this book available for us? I mean, can we read this thing? I love books.
Oh, absolutely. The book is it's available online. You can go. I have it posted on my LinkedIn profile. It's downloadable. This was a book that I've done at my previous company. It's Rapid Application for Dummies. That is available. But that talks about the stages and the phases of going through that digital journey and that exercise of going through that digital journey. And it applies to what we do at DataCore, because what we do at DataCore is we provide access to data. And those systems that you need access to, those systems of record or systems of engagement, you need to have that access to that information, because without access, the applications are pretty much useless, right? You need to have that connection to that data source in order to have that information available.
Yeah, no, completely. And so I'll get the link from you. And guys, if you're interested in this, which I definitely am, I'll throw it in the show notes of the podcast. So just, if you listen to it on DABCC, or if you're not, head over to DABCC, find the podcast within DABCC podcast, look at the show notes, and you'll get the link to the book and some other links too. So with digital transformation, you have things like Docker, Kubernetes, and other technology related to containers, and they're being leveraged to access and deploy systems and engagement, right? So can you describe containers and their purposes? I think containers is another one that I hear different, definitions from different people. So I'm really curious. And I think, like I said earlier, I think it's the future.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And it's a nice segue from the digital transformation question that we just talked about, or response, because when we talk about digital transformation, as I mentioned, there's digital initiatives. And that's the noun that occurs. Part of those digital initiatives is the focus to go and do modernization. And when we talk about modernization, and I mentioned the aspect of using systems of engagement, these are new applications that are being created. Okay, and as I also mentioned, that 20% of IT budgets are spent on innovation in most industries, and including tech. So one of the things that happens with containers, and just to give a kind of a short definition, but containers allows you to provide a sliver of resource, or part of resources available, dedicated and allocated to a project. Okay, so what that means is you don't have to, as an IT organization, go out and purchase a new server, a new data store, a new whatever that you need to purchase. You can use your existing resources and leverage those existing resources to provide workspace for those new systems of engagement that are coming online. This is what's viewed as modernization. So when you hear in the industry, people are trying to use digital initiatives to modernize, they're modernizing using new systems of engagement to access existing systems of record. And these new systems of engagement are built within a containerized environment. Does that make sense, Doug?
Yeah, absolutely. But so before organizations add these type of technologies to their digital transformation roadmap, how can they determine if containers are really the best fit for the needs? What are the advantages of using containers?
Yeah, great point. So one of the things about historically, where if you look at a couple of years back, hypervisors came into the picture. So you had VMware and Hyper-V and whatever hypervisor you choose to use. What it did was it provided the ability to encapsulate a work environment. But what you have with the hypervisor is you have the overhead of an operating system, and you have the application or whatever workspace you're running within that hypervisor. But you have to pay the tax of the operating system, okay? What containers allow you to do is to run without having the operating system in play. So you can provide resources for a microservice, a microservice being defined as a workload that's inside the container, okay? So that's an application that's inside the container. That microservice is available for without having to run an operating system underneath it, because that operating system is managed by, in this case, the container service that runs on top of it.
Yeah, you just gave the answer that I always give, and that is that the hypervisor comes with a cost, right? And that cost is performance or possibly security issues. Do you see containers being more secure, or is it just there are different ways to secure it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too. One of the things you have to take into consideration is with hypervisors, you kind of hit the nail on the head. With hypervisors and providing a virtual machine, you have this concept of sprawl, right? You have the sprawl of operating systems, which opens up, management and security issues on that sprawl, right? So, but, potentially, I think what containers allow you to do is, because they're not using an operating system to access the container, they're basically not vulnerable as much as a traditional attack would be on an operating system. So what you basically remove is the point of entry for that attack. Because the application is running on those resources, the container is self-contained, and even if that container was compromised, that container is fully encapsulated and fully isolated from the rest of the resources in the environment. So if it crashes and comes down, the rest of your infrastructure still is up and running, including your VM. So if you ran containers in a VM, your VM would stay up and running, but that container encapsulation would shut down.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Are there any drawbacks or pitfalls to containers, reasons where you would not want to use them?
Well, containers are purpose-built, okay? So the thing about containers, and this is where DataCore comes into the picture, containers by nature are stateless, meaning that if you write in a container, when you shut it down, any data that's not committed is lost. Okay, so if you're looking at building a work environment and an application that potentially, or a system of engagement that potentially does transactions, you have to, as a developer, make sure that the application commits the data to storage prior to shutting down the container. Okay, so in the event that there's, in the event that there's access where storage is not committed, that container shuts down. That data is no longer available. So what DataCore provides is a way to provide persistent storage into the container directly.
Totally makes sense. And I wanted to ask you, what was the DataCore play here? And I guess in many ways you answered that. Anything else to add there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I did kind of touch on it a little bit, and but I do want to talk about, with Docker and Kubernetes, you have this element of what's called the orchestration layer, and Docker Swarm is the orchestration layer for Docker, and Kubernetes has an orchestration layer as well. So depending on which technology you use, you would manage the storage through the orchestration layer, and the advantage of doing that is, with containers, as you can imagine, you may need multiple containers for one project. So you could have 3, 4, 5, 6 containers that live within what's called a pod, a grouping of containers. And that grouping of containers is managed through the orchestration layer, okay? So if you had a one-to-one ratio, one-to-one mapping, you could do persistent storage using our driver, our DataCore driver, either with Docker or Kubernetes, and provide storage directly into the container. That's great. But the next logical question is, well, container infrastructures, container environments are typically, lots of containers. It could be hundreds of containers. And to do this one-to-one, it would be very tedious and very cumbersome. We do not, we actually eliminate that one-to-one where we can connect directly with an individual container, but we also work within the orchestration layer to manage pods and groupings of containers. And that means that we can do provisioning across multiple containers, as well as do the porting of the storage from one container to another in the event that a container may go down and that microservice goes down. It can be balanced across multiple containers.
Okay, great. So you work with the orchestration layer. So can you talk a bit about the storage management layer? I know that's your core competency, right? So imagine you have a play there too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things we keep driving towards is the simplicity and the usability. We're really trying to drive towards this invisible infrastructure with DataCore. And the invisible infrastructure really provides the ability to do management through common tools or common interfaces. So your tools that you may be familiar with. So if a storage admin is familiar with DataCore, they can use our storage management platform to provision and deprovision the storage within the container orchestration layer. Okay, but what we also do is provide native access through tools that are embedded in the common tools that you may use. So if you're using ESX vVols, for example, you can manage and provision storage through vVols without ever having to open our UI. And then if you're using Windows Server, for example, you can use Server Manager or Server Center to do the provisioning and deprovisioning of storage, again, without having to open the UI. So what we're doing is we're providing IT organizations the ability to use our technologies without having to burden them with adding another resource onto their environment, into their data center to manage this. Because a lot of things we found from our customer surveys was IT organizations were struggling with staff augmentation. And the staff augmentation was, well, when we bring a new technology into the data center, it requires somebody to come up to speed on that technology. And what we're trying to do from DataCore's perspective is say, we understand that. We totally understand that. And what we want to do is give you the ability to use our UI if you choose to do so, or use the tools you already use today to have that common interface. And you can leverage our technology with your existing tools. So if you're using a tool that may be a server manager from a hardware vendor, for example, a Dell or Lenovo, whatever it may be, you can use our REST APIs or our REST calls to do all the complete functionality within our UI, our DataCore UI, through that common tool. So again, we're providing flexibility for the end user.
Very cool. Very cool. Makes total sense. So which DataCore products does all this? Is it Sand Symphony? I mean, is it a new product? What does one need to try, buy, learn more about, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. So we have our software-defined storage platform and portfolio of products. And our software-defined storage portfolio includes Sand Symphony, which you just mentioned, which is our platform for managing the storage across the entire infrastructure. But we also have our hyperconverged virtual SAN. Sure. And that's a deployment for if you wanted to do a hyperconverged consolidated resources within a single frame or not. But the advantage of our hyperconverged virtual SAN is we have the ability to manage not just your hyperconverged environment, but also any storage resources inside your data center at the same time. So if you're familiar with a hyperconverged model and you want to move in that direction for your project-based initiatives, we know one of the things that we do over our competition is we don't introduce a silo into your data center. We introduce a way to manage your entire infrastructure, but still have the autonomy of the project-based initiatives.
Makes total sense. That being said, I have to ask that question, why DataCore? In the sense of why would someone care about what you guys are doing versus maybe someone else that does something similar? What do you bring to the table that the others don't?
Yeah, absolutely. No. So with regards to, why DataCore, I think that there's a lot of innovation that we bring to the table, right? And part of that, and I'll kind of just, our core go-to-markets that we drive forward with is, we build a reputation of providing high availability and business continuity across a heterogeneous environment, right? And that truly maximizes your IT investment. Because I'll give you an example of that. We have customers that have been running for 20 plus years, right? That have been running the same virtual disk served up to the same host. But, that virtual disk that has been provisioned 20 years ago has been changed in the back end and it grew and it performs faster, et cetera. But that virtual disk to the host looks like the exact same disk that it was presented to 20 years ago. So behind the scenes, we transparently move hardware in and out, and DataCore does the management of that migration, so to speak, and that IT investment. We do fault tolerance, right? We know that it's if there's things going on, we can alert you, but that also we harmonize the performance across your data center as well. And harmonizing the performance, what that means is by leveraging different storage technologies and different storage in the environment, whether it's internal to a server or external arrays, they may perform differently. So if you have spinning disk or flash or SSD, whatever it may be, we can harmonize the performance across that and do auto tiering for your application up to 15 tiers, including tiering into the cloud. So we really truly have a unique blend of what IT organizations are looking for, but also, one thing you need to take into consideration is we may not do it like other people in the industry, but it doesn't make it wrong. It just means that, it's different, and different is potentially a better way of doing it. So when you're looking at DataCore, look at it into the lens of, will this address my need? And frankly, I think you'll be happy to find it and use it because it will give you the maximum flexibility, the maximum utilization of your environment, but it doesn't tend to follow the traditional competitive landscape of, you have to buy an appliance and turn it on and create a silo. That's just not how we operate.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I was answering that question, I'd say because these guys are the real deal. And if you don't believe me, go back and listen to any one of the podcasts I've done with the DataCore folks, guys, and it'll explain everything you need to know and more. I didn't start off this podcast by saying they're one of my favorite companies for nothing. It's rocket science made simple. I just truly love it. It's lightning fast. So, Paul, where do you see all this stuff going? What's next for DataCore within this space? What's next for containers in general?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So I'll answer the container question. I'll come back to DataCore. But basically, containers, I think 2018, 2019 is a pivot year for containers. It's introduced right now in the DevOps community. It's introduced as a way to leverage resources and infrastructure differently than you do today. But it really hasn't taken off mainstream because there's a lot of different vendors, different technologies, different approaches to deploying containerized applications and containerized approach, ways of doing business. I truly believe that in order to be innovative, we used to say the term "do more with less," right? And you used to hear that a lot within marketing, et cetera. But the reality of it is it's true when you have a limited budget to work with. And, if you look at, anybody that's listening to this podcast should look at their data center and go, okay, do I really have resources available in my data center? And when you look at the data center used to be a collection of computers. And now you have to view the data center as the computer itself, because that is where the vision and the future is going with, utilization of resources. Because frankly, when you buy a server and it's 85% utilized, you're basically not spending, you're wasting 15% of your spend or, of that utilization. So with containers, it allows us to get closer to that utilization mark of basically, using the resources that are available to you today. And I'll answer the second question of where's DataCore going? Well, DataCore is leveraging our history, our foundational principles of where we came from and what we're doing with our software-defined storage. We are definitely expanding and growing in the space. We came to market with a product called Max Parallel, and Max Parallel for Windows. Max Parallel allows us to do I/O optimization for the application and increase workload optimization, and so it allows you to do better performing I/O for the workload. So one of the cases that we demonstrated, use case that we demonstrated recently, was an auto parts shop was running reports nightly, and it was taking them over 40 hours to run a report. And, that basically is a long time to run a report. So they needed to know what their inventory was for the next day. So 40 hours was outside their window. We reduced their 40-hour runtime to 6 hours using Max Parallel. And the reason we were able to do that is because we were able to put it in, install it non-disruptively. It's an install with an application that runs in the system tray. It's running. Once it's on, you can see the immediate improvement, and then when you shut it off, you'll see that the improvement goes away. But it's a simple on-off. There's no hardware to configure. It's not intrusive. It's just a driver that runs within the operating and the environment. So that's really cool. That's just an example of some innovation that we're doing and moving forward. We're definitely looking at new ways to seamlessly integrate with the infrastructure and be more invisible. So the technology just works under the covers, and it's more of a user experience, a load and go type of model where you basically turn it on and it works versus having to spend a period of time configuring. So we're really excited about where we're going with this technology.
Absolutely. I'm excited about what you guys are doing too, and I look forward to having you on in the future as always. So that being said, I think that's what I have for you today. I'll go ahead and give you the last word if there's anything we left out or anything else you'd like to share with us. But anything?
Yeah, no, look, Doug, thank you for having me today. I mean, this was a really great opportunity for us to talk about where we're going, what we're doing, and how we're modern, how we're taking different modernized approaches to really address those digital initiatives and digital transformation challenges that businesses are seeing today. We're able to bring those price points down. So, where a lot of these enterprise plays is traditionally available only to the higher end businesses, we can bring that down to the SMB and SME market that's affordable and optimized for their infrastructure. So we're really excited about it. And again, thank you very much for having me today on your podcast.
Hey, well, thank you very much, Paul. It's truly my pleasure. So on that note, we'll go ahead and call it a show.
Thank you.
I wasn't joking. I love chatting with these guys. I love listening to them share with us and educate, really me. I was just in London a few weeks ago, and if the guys out there that I met, the guys that I met in London, if you're listening, hello, I very much enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm very glad that you listen to DABCC radio. And a few of them said, we love the show because we get introduced to these new technologies and we don't have the time to read up about them. We might not have even known that they're out there, and DABCC radio introduces us to them. And I made the comment back, and you guys, the longtime listeners know this, is I love this more than you do because I listen to every podcast, and I tend to listen to every one twice because I have to listen to it to edit it. And although there's not much editing involved, as you listen, you don't know. Every now and then I goof up trying to pronounce a word is usually what it is, which this podcast was Kubernetes, which I still can't spit out of my mouth. I had it perfect. I've said it many times, but once I said it today, I'm having trouble getting it out of my mouth. But it's a Friday. We're recording on a Friday, so what can I say? I'm blaming it on a Friday. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. If you guys liked it, definitely check out what DataCore is doing, www.datacore.com. Go back and listen to the previous podcasts I've done with these guys. I tell you, they're one of my favorite companies I've ever interviewed, that I've ever been introduced to. And every podcast I've done has just been phenomenal. So please go back and and go back and listen to them. And there's some with Zia. And this guy is the founder of DataCore, one of the co-founders of DataCore, and just probably the smartest and one of the smartest guys I've ever had the pleasure of meet, let alone interview. And he is infectious. And I say this every time. Go back and listen to the podcast with Zia. He lectures. He does. It's sort of like a lecture, but not like daddy lecturing a little kid that you don't want to listen to. It's the good lecture. In fact, believe it or not, I've listened to a couple of them just out of the blue because I wanted to listen to him talk. I mean, wow, is all I can say. It's infectious. You leave excited. You leave happy. Just a wonderful, wonderful man. Zia passed away the beginning of last year, I want to say. And, what a loss. Downright great guy. So thank you, DataCore. Thank you, Paul. But most of all, thank you to you guys who listen to DABCC podcasts. Thanks to the guys in London that I met a few weeks ago at the Citrix event for listening to. And I had a great conversation with you guys, too. So really a pleasure to meet you. And what do I say? If you like this show, definitely check out more episodes. Head over to www.dabcc.com for the latest and greatest everything within IT news and support. And of course, listen to, tell a friend. That's how we grow. So please tell a friend, tell them you love DABCC, tell them you love this DataCore episode, or tell them to go listen to Zia. I would. I just did. So what else do I say? But thank you again for listening to DABCC Radio.
CC?
DABCC.
Say it again. DABCC.
DABCC.
Can you say it again? DABCC.
DABCC.
How about DABCC?
DABCC.
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 DABCC.